Welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast, where we talk to C-level leaders from across the payments landscape. We'll be discussing the products and services that impact the payment space today, as well as trends and predictions for the future of payments. We will also hear stories from our guests about their journeys to the top.
The reality of scaling a startup is that it's extremely difficult. Sometimes you have months where you feel like you're a hero, and you have months where you feel like everything is on fire. And you need capital partners that appreciate that extreme difficulty and that are supportive not just in the good times, but in the bad periods. Because the bad periods also show up because you're taking risk and you're trying new things and you're pushing the envelope and you're putting your foot down on that growth pedal, and things sometimes going to blow up. And it was important for us to find somebody that had that reputation.
Hello, and welcome to episode 290 of the Leaders in Payments podcast. I'm your host, Greg Myers, and today on the show we have Jane Podbelskaya, the principal at Information Venture Partners, and Nick Beique, founder and CEO of Helsum. Information Venture Partners is a team of experienced venture capital investors focused exclusively on investing in B2B technology companies that are innovating in the fintech and enterprise SaaS space. Helsum is on a mission to build the world's most loved company. They are relentless in their pursuit to provide a radically transparent and honest payment solution that saves business owners, all while treating them like human beings. In this episode, we discuss what makes Helsum a unique and different payments provider. We also talk about why IVP invested in Helsum and what Helsum saw in IVP. I also get Nick and Jane's view of the future of our industry. We've got a great episode ahead, so let's get started. Hi, Nick and Jane. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the Leaders in Payments podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, Greg.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. And let's just dive right in. And Nick, I'll start with you. If you don't mind, tell our audience a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that, and maybe a little bit about your professional journey as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, on the personal side, so I actually was born in Texas, West Texas. Dad's side of family's from there, but moved to Montreal when I was 1 year old. So I actually grew up French, so it's a little bit of a strange kind of journey, and then moved in my teens to the Rockies, to Calgary here, which is a Canadian city, just kind of very similar to Denver. So I like to say I'm a Texas French Canadian, and at this point I feel like I speak none of the languages quite properly, but it's just a little bit of a mix. Grew up, self-taught computer programmer, grew up, loving everything about computers. I ended up taking a degree in business. I knew the computer side, or I felt like I knew the computer side, and I wanted to learn something different. And I always fell in love with the idea of the small business journey and kind of my own small business journey, kind of starting small companies when I was young, and fell in love with computer programming and kind of fell in love with the world of finance and business. And you put those three things together and somehow you end up in payments. And that's where I'm here today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Jane, your turn. Same question for you. Maybe a little about where you grew up, where you went to school, where you currently live, a few things like that, and a little about your professional journey as well.
Thank you. There's a long journey to compress here in just a few minutes, but I'll do my best. So actually, I was born and raised in Russia, and my mom is Ukrainian, my dad is Russian. So I'm actually very upset about everything that's happening in that part of the world right now, because I absolutely see those two nations as basically like parts of the same family. But I moved to Canada in 2007. I actually, just as Nick, I grew up loving computers and computer science. I was one rare child and rare girl, right, who was very nerdy, and I loved coding from like literally age of 12. And I went on to get a computer science degree in Moscow State University, and I worked as a software engineer while I was still in Russia. But when I moved to Canada, I became an architect, solution architect. I worked for large corporations. I worked with Xerox. And then I completed an MBA at University of Toronto, Rotman School of Management. And I then jumped into management consulting. I worked at Bain & Company for a number of years, experienced that crazy travel lifestyle that consultants have. But frankly, I miss technology way too much. So after a couple of years of consulting, I went back into tech, but this time on the investor side. So I joined a venture fund back in 2015. It was a growth stage venture fund, Georgian Partners. I spent the next almost 6 years working there. And then I actually got really passionate about early stage investing. And in particular, I got interested in fintech investing. So I left Georgian to join Information Venture Partners, which is a fintech fund. And I'm happy to tell you more about that. But as far as my life journey, I currently live in Toronto. I have a family here and I am a Canadian citizen now.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, Nick, back to you. So tell us about the company Helsum. So what does Helsum do?
Yeah, I'll assume, and I know that your audience is familiar with payments. So, forgive me, I'm going to jump straight into the kind of the payment lingo side.
Sure.
My kind of original foray into business or into payments was about a decade ago as an ISO MSP. So we were a partner of Elavon's and really got to learn the payment space and the merchant space and kind of fell in love with the whole payments business in general. And we did a major pivot about 3 years ago where we became a payment facilitator or PayFac. And we really took it all the way. We essentially became our own processor. So we run our own, not just our merchant front end, but our back end, our settlement systems, everything is really, our hardware deployment is really run by Helsum. And the best way to think about us in the marketplace, this is how we like to kind of describe it, is you have a lot of kind of fintech entrants on the micro merchant space. If you think about the Squares of the world and the SumUps of the world, and they do really well in that kind of micro merchant space. And then you have a lot of other fintechs in kind of embedded marketplace and enterprise space, the Braintrees and the Stripes and the Adyen's of the world. But when it comes to this really interesting middle space in payments, which is kind of more traditional businesses, you think about vets and dentists and wholesalers and auto mechanics. Most of those businesses, there's millions upon millions of them that are still being serviced by more kind of traditional legacy acquirers, the global payments of the world and the First Datas of the world. And we felt that there was a lot of room in there for disruption and new entrants and somebody that can take a very modern approach to that market. And that's essentially what we've built Helsum to be today. So we have 150 employees right here in Calgary. We service tens of thousands of merchants across Canada and US. And we like to say that our mission is to be the world's most loved payments company. And if you're familiar with payments, that can be a little bit of an oxymoron sometimes. Merchants, it's a little bit of, they need payments, but they don't always love their payments provider. And we're really trying to change that in the market.
Okay, I love it. So what makes Helsum unique in the market?
Yeah, I think there's a couple key pillars the way we look at our service. So pricing transparency is a huge part of it. I'm sure merchants are super sensitive to the rates they pay, and we make sure that we know that our rates have to be affordable, but it's not about having the lowest rates in the market. It's about having the most transparent rates in the market. We really stay away from bad industry practices of monthly fees, hidden fees, PCI compliance fees and all the stuff that really kind of irk merchants ultimately. So that's a big part of our service. We also have amazing customer service. We make it up and down part of our brand and really treat merchants the way that I think they deserve to be treated, no matter how small they are. And then the third thing is we take a full digital first approach to our service. So everything is self-service, everything is omni-channel, everything is kind of wrapped in really slick software to make the experience as modern as we think that these businesses deserve.
Okay, great. Well, Jane, let's go over to you. So tell us about Information Venture Partners.
Yeah, happy to. So we are a fintech fund. So we invest in B2B fintech technology. Specifically, we're investing in technology for financial services institutions, but also we're quite active in payments. We are an early stage investor. We are primarily coming into the companies around Series A, or when companies reach around 1 million in run rate. If you're talking about SaaS, that would be run rate in revenue. If you're talking about payments, that's your gross profit run rate. We invest across North America, and we're investing at our third fund right now. So we've been around for a while, but we've always been a relatively small $100 million fund. And we've been very consistent about our strategy. We're happy to have backed a number of unicorns and had very successful exits. And now we're here excited to be an investor in Helsum and hoping that one day they will join the ranks of those unicorns.
Great segue to the next question. So in March of 2022, you led Helsum's Series A round of funding. So what was it about Helsum that was so unique that you wanted to invest in them?
Yeah, so I've actually been talking to Helsum for about a year. before we decided to jump forward with the offer? Well, first off, when I joined Information Partners, maybe if I kind of take a few steps back, right? One of the ideas I had was to build our payments thesis and find some new interesting payments companies. As I said, Information Venture Partners have invested in payments companies before, but it's been a while since the last investment, and I got really interested in the space. And I was actually looking at a few payments companies, and Helsum crossed my desk. And I first spoke to Helsum CFO Marjorie a year prior to investment. So that would have been about March 2021. And I've been talking to Marjorie and later with Nick for, as I said, for almost a year, getting to know the team, watching them grow, watching them develop. And what really struck me, well, first off, is I realized that, well, this is an early stage company, but Nick has been actually an experienced operator in the payment space for almost a decade. So he's not a newbie when it comes to managing a payments company. He was actually managing an MSP organization or reseller organization. And then he took the initiative to basically develop a payment facilitator solution from scratch, which he financed through the MSP business, which was the second point that I really liked about Nick and his team, is that they were very cash conscious. And in the world, especially in the year 2021, when all the companies were burning through VC capital like there's no tomorrow because capital was almost free, they were a very rare example of a company that was basically like coming out of bootstrapping and have built a very sophisticated payments tech stack on their own money. So I was quite impressed with that. And there were other things that were very interesting to me. And some of that is what Nick just told you about, right? I know that the payment space and the market that Helsum is addressing is truly big. And the way I kind of like my investment hypothesis around payment solution was that you have on the micro merchant side, you have Square. And when I talk about micro merchants, I'm talking about your coffee shops or your local artists that are making a lot of payment transactions that are relatively small in size, but at high volumes, right? And Square has captured that market very successfully. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have ADMs of the world that are very equally successfully servicing enterprise customers. But what's in the middle? It's primarily, I don't want to upset anyone, but it's literally like old school traditional payments companies that's been around for dozens of years. And there hasn't been a lot of innovation in that mid-market segment for quite some time. And Helsum has truly developed a brand new, novel, best of class payments technology to service that middle market. And they were growing. Over that year that I've been talking to them, they were capturing merchants very, very fast. And we did quite a number of reference calls with those merchants, and everybody was raving about the customer support that Helsum was providing to them. Square is notorious about basically letting your customers talk to the robots instead of humans. And the rates that they were providing were super competitive. Onboarding process was very easy. So lots of great feedback and combination of experienced team, great market opportunity, and great customer feedback made me very excited and convinced that this is going to be a future winner. So we went ahead. We were not the only investor at the table, so it was actually a competitive round. I don't know why Nick chose us. Maybe he'll tell us that. Shameless plug. But we actually co-invested into the round. We went together with US investor Aquiline. So it was a joint round, but we were the ones who actually initially identified the opportunity.
Great. So Nick, it's back to you. So we know why Information Venture Partners wanted to invest. Why did you choose them?
Yeah, I mean, isn't it great when your investors are on a podcast, talking great about you? I mean, it's I'll take that all day long. But yeah, joking aside, I mean, the IVP and Jane and Rob and Dave and all the partners of the firm, they truly have a reputation of being kind of long-term partners that will be with you through the ups and downs. And it was a competitive round, and ultimately we went with IVP because of that reputation. The reality of scaling a startup is that it's extremely difficult. Sometimes you have months where you feel like you're a hero, and you have months where you feel like everything is on fire. And you need capital partners that appreciate that extreme difficulty and that are supportive not just in the good times but in the bad periods, because the bad periods also show up because you're taking risk and you're trying new things and you're pushing the envelope and you're putting your foot down on that growth pedal, and things sometimes going to blow up. And it was important for us to find somebody that had that reputation. And it sounds obvious. I mean, you could give the same advice to somebody about a relationship or marriage. It's going to be lots of up and down, and this is a long-term partnership, and find somebody that's going to not just support you in good times, but really be in your corner during bad times too. And that it sounds like obvious advice, but the reality in the investor space is that a lot of investors kind of don't meet that standard. And, you talk to a lot of different CEOs, and sometimes they have really great things to say about some investors, and sometimes they have really not so great things to say. But IVP, everybody we talked to just said, like, they will be in your corner. They will help you build that company into a big, the big, huge company that we want to build into and take it public one day. And, we've been together for over 20 months now, and that reputation has absolutely been proven. So we're so happy that we end up choosing them.
You gave a little advice to other companies, but obviously times have changed, and even since 2022, the markets are a lot different. So, what advice would you give companies today when they're out there looking for capital?
I mean, obviously the markets have shifted. We are lucky that we've continued to have some pretty significant growth. So I think that top tier companies are having an easier time still finding capital. I think, but it's definitely tougher. Valuations are not what they used to be. The advice I would give to CEOs that are out there looking to raise is that regardless of what's happening in the market, regardless of what's happening with some of the pullback with investors, regardless of what's happening with valuations, I think the basic advice doesn't change, which is you are not trying to build a business in a year or two. You're trying to build a business over a decade, and you're trying to build something really big and really different and unique, and it's going to be a journey. And finding investors that has that same long-term thinking. I think one of the blessings in disguise of what's happened is that I think investors have really kind of shown a little bit more of their true color of who's in it, who's a true VC, who's a true venture capitalist and understands that roller coaster, and who is really focused on the short term. And I think you're seeing that in the investors that are stepping up and willing to have those conversations and make offers to investors. And then you're seeing it in others that are maybe don't truly have that same long-term startup mindset. So I do think that while the markets are tougher out there, it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise. You get to see who's really in it for the long run.
Okay. Well, final question for you, Nick. So where do you see the payments industry headed, say, in the next maybe 2 to 3 years?
I think it's a continuing trend where not only do you have to build a world-class payments experience, but you need to bring in a world-class software experience with it. Your relationship with merchants might start with payments, but it needs to evolve in a way that is much beyond that in order to keep that customer. And you really need to be the one making the investment in building that software. If you're reselling somebody else's software, unfortunately, first, you're going to be on the short list to be cut out of that relationship sooner or later. And then second, the experience will never be to the level that it needs to be for you to stand out in the market. So I think that companies that really take the hard path and combine payments and software seamlessly together under one roof. And sometimes the market's going to come as software first, and then they'll do the effort to bring in payments. Sometimes it's going to be payments first, and they'll bring in the effort to bring in software. But the ones that are being able to put it seamlessly together are the ones that are ultimately going to win the market.
Yeah, a little follow on to that. So being kind of in that software PayFac space, a lot of people have talked about, the software being kind of the operating system that these small businesses run on. And looking out to the future, I often talk to people about, okay, well, it's payments today, but does it become insurance and payroll and all those other products that small businesses need that they have to go to 17 people to get them from? I mean, is that a vision that you have for your company, or do you think the industry's headed that way? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think that ultimately everyone is aiming to own the full vertical. And there's different ways to go about it. So I do think that there's a fallacy in thinking coming from both sides. So for example, on the payment side, people go, oh, we'll figure out payments. We know payments well, then we'll slap on some software, right? And I think that's a mistake because software is a lot more complicated to get it right. But then I think the same mistake happens on the other side where you have software companies saying, oh, we're good at software. Payments is easy. We'll just kind of slap on a payment offering on top of it. And the reality is that, to do payments right at the right rates with the right depth and functionality is really, really hard. So I think that the ultimate winners in this market are people that take both of those things seriously at the depth that you need to go to and bring them together. And that's what we're doing. And that's how we think we're going to be unique in the market.
One other question about sort of the future, and back a couple of years ago, it was all the rage talking about blockchain and all of the newer technologies around, using blockchain and Bitcoin and all of that fun stuff. Do you see a future there in any of that? Is it just now off the table, or are you hearing it still in the market?
We really dug hard to try to find a way to see if there's a fit for us and as part of the merchants that we service, because that comes from our first place, which is what are our small business customers asking for? And the reality is that in the years I've done this, we have yet to have a single merchant ask us, hey, I really want to accept Bitcoin or Ethereum or anything like that. It just hasn't been the demand in the market, right? So then you kind of fall into a bit of a trap of trying, it's back to solution trying to solve a problem that isn't really there. So, who knows? Maybe I'll eat my words and somebody's going to figure out a way to crack that market, but we're going to stick to listening to what our customers are asking, and our customers are just asking for us to take the existing payments, schemes with ACH and FedNow and card payments and just make it faster, cheaper, more, and more seamless and with better software. And that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Well, Jane, over to you. Final question for you. What are you seeing in terms of venture capital? Like, we all read the headlines, and we've talked a little bit about this already, where things are different than they were obviously a couple of years ago. So do you think that we've turned a corner and there's going to be more investments in fintech, or it's going to be picking up in 2024 and beyond?
Well, the big picture question here is that we're rather returning to the norm as opposed to going into some bad time where there's no VC capital available. The VC capital absolutely will be available. The question is at what pace, and it's definitely not going to be the pace of 2020, 2021, 2022. However, there is still so much opportunity in fintech. Nick is right, valuations have adjusted. And this, of course, is correcting a lot of things for a lot of both companies and investors. And it's a rocky time for everyone to live through. But nevertheless, I see quite a few very interesting trends in fintech. And to answer your question, maybe on the decentralized finance, I actually think that there is absolutely more role for blockchain technology in financial services down the road. We have lived through the hype cycle of Bitcoins and all the currencies, but as a foundational infrastructure, I still think that we're yet to see some really good developments. In terms of payments, I actually think more of cross-border payments more than domestic payments, because for domestic and for a lot of consumer to business, smaller amount payments, we have great infrastructure in the world today in form of the credit cards, Visas and MasterCards. But for B2B transactions, I think there's room to explore new technologies, and blockchain, I think, will play a role there. In terms of other exciting trends in fintech that I'm watching, I actually continue to be excited about embedded financial services and embedded payments. Helsum, just to be clear, is much more of a customer-facing, merchant-facing solution as it stands today. It's not meant to be an embedded solution. But as a VC, I'm watching both sides of the market, the merchant-facing, front-facing solutions like Helsum and embedded. And also, as A16Z has famously wrote 2 years ago, that every company is going to become a fintech company, every company will be a payments company. And now I think we need to fine-tune that quote as to say that every company will become Gen AI enabled fintech company. So we're absolutely watching closely how Gen AI is being used in fintechs. I know that even Helsum uses AI in the background for some of the risk scoring, etc. We actually just made an investment in InsurTech AI-enabled company. So that's definitely going to be another trend to watch. But yeah, I'm very bullish on the space as we continue to have high hopes for what it's going to bring us in the near future.
Sure.
And in the long-term future too.
Yeah, and we used to hear, right, the growth, and that was what it was all about. And now it's about profitability. I mean, do you think that kind of way of looking at it will continue where, the software companies or the payments companies, fintech companies of old that were really just trying to almost grow it at all costs has really kind of shifted to it's a more of a profitability conversation? I mean, are you seeing that, and do you think that's going to continue in the future?
Absolutely, I'm seeing that. And I wish I could tell you nah, growth is always going to be important. Growth will be important for investors. And this is kind of why we invest in companies to begin with, is because we expect them to grow bigger over time. But yeah, the reality is capital is no longer free. And again, I will repeat myself here. We are going back to the norm where it's not just about growth, it's about the efficiency of that growth and the metrics. And what's your cost of customer acquisition? What is your churn? What is your net retention? All these metrics will be more important than ever. And similarly, like Helsum, for instance, is investing a lot in fine-tuning their marketing and go-to-market engine right now to make it as efficient as possible, so that every new dollar of revenue or gross profit that they gain, they're gaining and adding efficiently. And that ultimately translates into better capital efficiency, right? If you are growing efficiently, that means you're burning less capital. And yeah, you have to actually budget for the capital you raise to last longer than you would have just a year ago. So that's just the reality. And yeah, you need to have, as a fintech these days, you need to have a backup plan of how you become profitable and sustain your own growth if you hit some headwinds in the markets like we have today with high interest rates, etc. That is to say, companies that grow efficiently and show that great unit economics and their growth will continue to attract venture capital and grow further.
Well, Nick, Jane, we've covered a lot of ground so far. Is there anything else you guys want to cover before we wrap up the show?
No, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Greg. This has been super exciting. I guess we are fintech investors, so we're biased here on the payments. But yeah, cheers to a new year of financial services evolution. And I think there's great things to come.
Absolutely. Well, Happy New Year to both of you. And thank you so much for being on the show today. I know your time is very valuable, so I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And to all you listeners out there, I thank you for your time as well. And until the next story.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Leaders in Payments podcast. Make sure you visit our website at leadersinpayments.com, where you can subscribe to the show and where you'll find our show notes. If you enjoyed listening, please share on your social channels as well.